Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. And like you said, Karina, I am a connector. And so it's kind of weird to not really have a live audience that I can see and interact with, but that's okay. This is the next best thing, and let's make it a great thing. All right. I'm going to share my screen here as we get started. So let's make sure everything's working there. All right. So Karina, is my screen up for the PowerPoint?
You're looking great, Brett.
Awesome, awesome. All right. Well, I know it's your lunchtime, so if you're going to eat in front of me, I can't see you, so don't worry about it. It's fine, and I won't eat in front of you as I'm presenting, though. I'm going to save my donut for later. Anyway, I am a connector and have probably been a connector with people and primarily children since I was a summer camp counselor many years ago when I was 18 years old, and it was kind of at that point that I learned that kids just want to be known. They want to know you, and they want to be known. And sometimes being a little goofy kind of helps when you're in the camp environment, and even in the school environment, but connecting on a level where they get to know you. So we're going to talk about building a culture of connection. And really what it's all about is building a group mindset of how are we going to intentionally connect with our children in our schools, or whatever your institution or organization is. How will you form that group mindset to connect with your stakeholders, primarily the children? So I know that when we look at neglect, abuse, and the changes that make up trauma and adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, a lot has to do with failed attempts to know or to be known. And that's for children or families, and unfortunately that creates a trauma background for a lot of kids. Right now though, we're going to do kind of a time warp. I'm going to ask you to flash back to some of your happier school days as a child. Get a picture in your mind of a favorite teacher, maybe as a principal, maybe as a bus driver, or even a custodian or a food service worker. I want you to have that person's face in your mind and just think about, how did that person reach out and make a difference to you? What did that person say? What did that person do? How did they connect with you as you were a student? So as you're doing that, I want to share with you who the person was for me. Her name is Mrs. Abe. And Mrs. Abe was an 8th grade teacher for me. And I tried to look her up. I couldn't find her. It's been a long time since I was in 8th grade, so those odds may not be too great for me to find her. But it was at a time when I flash back to my socially awkward years, kind of an awkward 8th grade boy, and that's verified by girls' comments in my yearbook from that year. But Mrs. Abe, despite all my awkwardness, despite my shyness, she saw and affirmed my creativity and my aptitude for language. She praised and she displayed my work. It was on the wall in the classroom. It was in the hallways of the school. And she even called my mom once, not because I was in trouble, but to brag about me and my work. And my mom was a teacher at the time too, so she did that. But it was Mrs. Abe's gentle encouragement and her abundant praise that made a difference for me. So right now, I'm going to ask each of you to face your past. Come up with some thoughts about a special connector. What did that person say? What did that person do to connect with you? And then we're going to take a poll here in just a second. And Karina's going to help facilitate that poll, right? Karina, you're good on that? Right on. So on that poll, it's going to ask you who the person was that was your favorite school person. And again, it doesn't have to be, it can be any of these categories. It's not necessarily a teacher. But if you would right now, just take that poll. First question being, who was your favorite school person? And then the second question will pop up after you've had a chance to do that and fill that in with what your favorite school person did or said that made you feel connected at school. So let's take a moment to do that. And Karina, when we get those results back, I'd like to kind of summarize the top 3 as far as the who, and then the top 3 as far as the what that person did or said. If it's possible to summarize that. I don't know that you can compile all that right now or not.
We're at 66% right now. We'll just give it a few more minutes, Brett.
Great, perfect.
Okay, we're ready to share results, Brett.
Awesome. Yeah, if we could hear the top 3, let's say, of the favorite school person Which titles garnered those votes? Wow, teacher. And I don't know how many teachers we have in our audience, but look at that impact. You may never know the impact that you've had. I've had kids come back to me, years later after I taught high school in the 90s. It sounds like so long ago. Well, it was. But I've had kids come back to me and let me know that I made a difference for them. And it wasn't necessarily about subject matter. You will get that too if you've been in education 2 or more years. All right, and then the next was coach. Awesome, and there might be some, let's see, I'm gonna scroll down, make sure I'm looking at everything. Okay, got it. So teacher, coach, and then look at this. It's interesting, it's maybe tied with custodian, librarian, and aide. That's awesome. So nobody's value as far as connectedness in the school is invalid here at all. As you see, there's some principals that have made a difference. Secretaries, you know what? I know they make a difference. And if you'd come to Hazel Fisher School, you know that the secretary, any secretaries that have been there during my 13 years have made a difference with a lot of kiddos. So neat to see that. I'd like to see that filled in, but that's okay. Food service. Same thing. My experience with food service when I was a kid was that I got to be involved. I got to help serve. Somebody in that kitchen connected with me and let me slop spaghetti onto the trays of other kids, and then also use the cool dishwasher. But that was a connection that was made by food service people for me when I was a kid. So it does not matter what your role is in the school. You may even be a volunteer in the school. You will have an impact on kids' lives. All right, I'd like to go ahead and scroll down now. I can see the results here of what kinds of things people said or did. And it looks like overwhelmingly, somebody connected with you by encouraging a particular talent that they saw in you. And that was mine too. Mrs. Abe encouraging me with my linguistic interests, my aptitude for languages. Totally went on to become a Spanish major, taught Spanish for a while. I'm doing that a little bit part-time right now. I love to write. So I attribute a lot of that to Mrs. Abe, and then a mom that also nurtured that. So let's see, the next highest one here looks like it's going to be, I'm scrolling up, greeted or smiled at me on a regular basis. Wow. Not even words necessarily, not even conversation per se, but a hello maybe, or a good morning, or just a smile or a wave as you walk through the hallways, or maybe entered the school, or maybe you visited that teacher's classroom and just made a connection. That's awesome. And then it looks like talk to me or listen to me during breaks or lunch. I know I had kids come into me as a teacher that they wanted to spend their lunch period with me. They had no agenda other than just to have time with me. And I had no agenda other than just to listen to them and to encourage them. Wow. Awesome. Thank you for participating in that. Hang on to those thoughts too about the person that impacted you, because at the end of this, I'm going to have a special assignment for you on that. I'm going to move on to the next slide now. Everybody's heard the story of the boy that was tossing those starfish into the ocean and before they could dry up or dehydrate on the shore. And then someone came along, an older man, it said, and his words were discouraging to the boy. He said, "You can't save them all." But that boy said, "Yes," but it made a difference for that one that he threw back into the ocean. So how do we as a staff or as individuals move from that one mentality to those ones? And I know that's poor grammar for those grammarians out there, but those ones meaning everyone. How do we make that shift from a that one mentality to an everyone mindset? That's a little bit of what we want to talk about in this next 45 minutes. I will say, first of all, as a staff, we need to become kid-centered. Not just individually, but as a team. We need to become a kid-centered team. We need to build a culture of connection. That is the reason we go to work. That is the reason we stay at work. And that is the reason that we even stay beyond the workday sometimes for that one or those ones, which may be many depending on your school demographics. So how do we build that team mentality of getting to know each one? Well, what we did at Hazel Fisher School about 3 years ago, it began with a deep holistic look at all the students' needs. That included the ACEs and the challenges, if you'll let me call it that. I listed every kid's name on what I call the scroll, and it was simply sheets of post-it sticky note charts on the wall. I listed every child's name on that scroll with columns labeled by circumstance or challenge. And so some of those circumstances or challenges were these: attendance issues, behavior, academics. Maybe the child was experiencing some grief from a loss, a situation of divorce, known abuse, special talent. There's a positive one there too among that. How do we meet the needs of kids that have the special talents? Illness, parent incarcerated, foster youth, homelessness, substance abuse, medical issues, an IEP, a second language learner, grandparent guardian, listed all these possible, what I will call ACEs or challenges on this list along with student names. And then there's our expression as a staff, we're like, oh, wow, oh, there's a lot of kids with some needs, but we were up for it. This is kind of what the chart looked like, just to summarize it onto a piece of paper. This is kind of how it was headed. We had the students' names over on the left, we had the teachers' initials and the teachers' grade, so we knew exactly where these students were, because we wanted to target them with interventions or supports at the school that would help those kids that were facing some of the ACEs or challenges that we talked about. So over a week or so of this scroll being up on the wall, staff put up little sticky dots on the areas of concern that they knew about, whether they knew the child's family or knew the child personally, or had some direct connection about that child's life of an ACE or a challenge that we could address as a school. There were a lot of sticky dots by the end of that week or so. But now we had a visual that helped us realize how many kids were in crisis or how many kids were lacking support or resources that needed to be successful in school. So what did we do with that, or how did we handle that? How did we work with that information? Well, this provided a reality check that told us it was going to take more of our efforts to reach hearts first and then to reach the heads of our children. Because if we did not reach the hearts of these kids who were struggling or suffering or going through ACEs, we would not be able to reach their heads until we reach their hearts. So some of you may have applied for the California Scale Up Multi-Tiered System of Support Statewide Initiative, SUMS grant, in 2018 and 19. They gave us $25,000 to do the things on here. I don't expect you to read that whole page, but that's just where we identified some needs of our school, which was a socioeconomic diverse group. School bells going off. Thank you. No kids here, but we still have the bell automated. We got that grant. And once we got that grant, we were able to do some super important things that started to make a difference. The first thing that I wanted to get in place was a place for parents to feel comfortable in coming to the school. We all know that a lot of parents have negative attitudes about school because, well, that was their experience when they were in school. We can flip that. That was my goal, is to flip those attitudes and also to flip that fear of coming into the school or feeling unfamiliar with the school by giving parents a place. And I'll call it a lobby for lack of a better term. We had a classroom that wasn't being used that year, so we furnished it with some nice furniture with tables that flipped out from these cushy chairs. And they had a boardroom table and some swivel chairs. There was a desk with a computer, a telephone. And we also kept information up on the walls and in filing cabinets so parents could discreetly come in on their own time. They check in the school office and they go to the resource room. And in that privacy, they could sort through the filing cabinet. If they wanted to look up counseling resources, or if they wanted to find out something about, how do I help my child? I think he has autism. There were resources there for them. I worked with our school counselor on that to staff that and to provide support when parents had questions. If they found something and they wanted to be very confidential about it or not really make it known, they could come directly to me and say, okay, how do I follow up on this resource? Or I heard that you have a school counselor. That Parent Resources Hub became a comfortable place for parents to come and for them to sometimes hang out and network with other parents. But that was a priority to get that room established. Another thing we were able to do with those monies was to establish regular MTSS team meetings. And in our team meetings, we had a book study. We studied Lost in School by Dr. Ross Green. It addresses children who come to school and they are just emotionally lost or academically lost or both, and that need support. So we began the book study in that as a team. Now on that team, there was a kindergarten teacher, there was a first grade teacher, there was a school librarian, there was a special education support staff member, and myself, the principal. So in addition to the book study, we also had consultation with Fresno Diagnostic Center. The grant had given us some money. However, we ended up not needing money for Fresno Diagnostic because they provided staff development free of charge to us. It was pretty amazing, but because we were in the MTSS grant cycle, we were a priority school for them to come to. So we had incredible staff development. We went to their center, they came to us, they provided us information about dyslexia, about other learning disabilities, about their free testing services for families. He gave us a ton of resources as an MTSS team to go ahead and reach out to the rest of our school, to our staff, and then to our families that had needs as well. Some of our staff development also included some staff development with San Joaquin County Office of Education. And that staff development was focused on continuous improvement and self-monitoring strategies. How do we monitor our baseline where we're starting? And then how do we see the effects of the grant through the grant cycle of 2 years? How do we measure our growth throughout that time? Part of what this MTSS team did also included revamping our SST process, our student success team or student study team process. And that was something that was lacking. There had been a lot of turnover with principals or with teachers or with teacher leaders who ran the SST process, and it needed to be revamped. There were not consecutive records of students when they were seen for intervention, what was done for interventions, or any of the follow-up. So our team took it on, 2 members of the team, actually, a teacher and one of the special ed aides, took it on to compile historically over the last 3-4 years, previous 3 or 4 years, the history of each child who had come through the SST process to look at what was tried, what was attempted, what did not work, and then to recommend new interventions and then to track those. And so we began to see incredible growth. It also helped not only streamline the process, but it also made it more of a conversation piece for the parent so that we could say to the parent, okay, for 3 years you've been with us and these are the things we've tried, these have not worked or these have worked. How are you doing at home? What more can we provide as a school? How can we help you more? So that was a huge outcome of us implementing the grant and the focus of the MTSS team. We also had some classified and certificated staff trainings. We invited our school counselor, we invited our school psychologist. We also invited behaviorists from the County Office of Education to train us on evidence-based practices, on data taking tips, how to do observations of students and to give constructive feedback to those who would support those students. They also trained us on trauma-informed strategies, self-regulation tips, to work with students and some staff, and how to use visual supports and transitional supports, and then the incredible 5-point scale. So we had certificated staff getting trained in that, teachers, and then we had support staff that worked in the classrooms or worked on the yard getting trained in that. Everybody ended up with a lanyard that they could wear in their neck that had representation of the 5-point scale, so they could work with the kid and say, how are you feeling today? Show me which icon, which picture represents how you're feeling. It gave them talking points, it gave staff talking points to be able to address regulation with kids on the playground or in the classroom or in the hallways. Pretty big quantum leaps that we made through that. Then a huge, wonderful thing that Karina, our my introducer, also helped us with was the sensory room, and then implementing heavy work and jobs and that sort of thing. So we implemented what we call the RISE room. And that was a place where kids could go. There was a swing. It was equipped with a box drum, a beanbag chair, a weighted blanket, a weighted ball, music, a small climbing wall, gym mats, exercise balls, a whiteboard. With Karina's help, she developed an amazing schedule that booked itinerant staff and some of our site staff with certain kids at certain times throughout the day. And Karina was able to come on a regular basis. We had other staff, support staff from the county office coming on a regular basis, where they would meet with the kid in the sensory room and spend time helping that child with self-regulation strategies or just listening to the child. It was amazing. So that's something that currently at the school, I think it's planned to come back, but there's some construction, so that room is having to move and all that and be reconfigured. But that's something that we hope continues because it really gave those kids the break that they needed, the adult staff support that they needed, and some training and self-regulation. So that was a big piece. And I know there's some other schools in our county that are doing the same thing, and I commend them for that as well. So those are some of the things that came out of our MTSS grant. The biggest thing being the MTSS team becoming a leadership team for the school. So in staff meetings, we had a place for the leadership team, the MTSS leadership team, to share learnings or to share ideas, thoughts, suggestions with the rest of the staff. It became a driving force at his school during those grant years. Let me talk a little more about heavy jobs too, because actually that was a fun thing for me. One time we had a kiddo that just needed to feel grounded, and we knew that, okay, weighted blankets worked and all that, but I'd heard something from a staff member about heavy work. And I'm like, what is heavy work? I like heavy work. Get me a shovel, get me a pick. And, but it's about work that grounds kids. It gives them a useful task, but also gives them a sense of grounding. So for example, we had a child that most of us would say would get in trouble all the time. Well, he would dysregulate a lot. And he just needed time with an adult and time to push something. So we load up a box of books, a couple boxes of books on one of the custodian carts, and we have him push it from point A to point B. I had to walk with him, and it gave me a chance to also talk with him or to listen to him. And sometimes the child didn't talk, but I was there with him. He performed a task. He got a sense of belonging. He got a sense of accomplishment, and it just made such a difference. I actually have a whole sheet of heavy jobs and activities. I'll just read you a few examples from those. Tidy up the PE supplies on the cart. Fill the watering can to water the plants out front. Rake the dead apples in the leaves in the fall. Sweep the gym floor, mop the gym floor, sharpen pencils. And of course, these are all things that are done with adult supervision, and they're done with intentionality, not just having the kid accomplish a task for the custodian or for the principal, but doing something that gives him or her a sense of purpose, that gives them that physical grounding, and that also builds a connection with another adult. So that heavy work was something that kind of became a special thing, special time for me and several kids over the years. FaceTime. So you all know the Cheers theme song. I was going to play it for you, but I just want to read a few lines for you from that song. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. Our goal was this, as a staff at Hazel Fisher School, was to know every child by name. And I would say that most staff accomplished that they got to know the kids. It's not really rocket science. It's really about connection. It's what I've always believed, always practiced as a teacher. It has to start with the face of the school. And who is the face of the school? It may be the teacher, it may be the librarian. At Hazel Fisher, it was all of our staff. I was trying to be prominent every morning out front, and so staff could see me. I tried to be prominent in the community so that kids could see me, that I'm involved in the community. And when I see them in the grocery store, which we can't avoid often up in our small communities, I took time for them. I gave them time of day. I connected with them and connected with parents in and out of the hallways, at assemblies, at presentations, and had what I will call authentic conversation, which means that I listened to the parents, whether they wanted to share something exciting or share a concern, whether that was in the grocery store, and a lot of them did not take advantage of that, thank you. So I could go and get my milk, get my dinner, and get back home. But a lot of them took advantage of that at the school, which I invited to have authentic conversation, talk about, gosh, you're having trouble with your child who's not even in school yet. Here's some recommendations I have for you. To have that authentic conversation, have authentic connection with families. It also means, even during this distance learning time, I was invited to a family's home to learn to do blacksmithing with the dad and the mom and the two boys. And it was pretty awesome, but it was because I had established that affinity, that connection at school, that they felt comfortable to invite me to their home and have me learn something new alongside their kids. Other families had, I will not say the honor, but One time a student had passed away at the a student at school had passed away, and I was invited to do the memorial service. But that was an authentic connection that I had with the family that made such a difference for me, made such a difference for the rest of the school too. So I enjoy being that real connector with kids, but we all have to be that face of the school. We all have to be somebody that the families trust, that they can build rapport with, develop that affinity that helps to get buy-in at school. And it's not just to get the buy-in at school, it's also just to build that relationship. So it's genuine interest, it's genuine concern that's conveyed and that's received. It's really the same thing that all kids want from you at school, that your own kids, if you have children at home, want from you. They want your attention and they want to know that you care and that they belong. So these are just some other ways of getting connected and being goofy with kids. They want to know you're human and that you care. Being goofy or being a kid with them sometimes doesn't hurt either. As we know, every kid has a story. And sometimes the stories are deep and brutally honest and agonizing. Sometimes they're light and surfacey. But we all know the kids behind these faces. In fact, when I found one of these on, when I Googled the images, I go, I know that kid. I really don't, but he looks like a lot of kids that I've had over time, or his expression does anyway. And again, when I listen for their real stories, sometimes they tell you things that you need to take to a higher authority, or you need to take to more professional sources. Sometimes there are things you need to sadly report as well. But I listen for those real stories. And basically, it's just natural for me to show interest in their lives and to hear out their tales of Minecraft conquests, or how to get the golden pickaxe, or whatever that magic thing is that they get in Minecraft. And listen to them, give them the time of day when it's about them, when it's about the things that they care about. Get in their quality world is another thing that I call it. And when I give them the time of day, when I get into their quality world, I build connection. Same for each of you. You each have a kid with a face like each of these kids shown on the screen right now. So how are you connecting with their stories? Are you helping them to rewrite their stories? Sometimes where those stories need to be rewritten. Something I want you to ponder and strategize with me on right now, just kind of in your mind. We can't really do this interactively on this venue, but I want to maybe come back to this at the end of the presentation if there's time. What are the enemies of connection? And by enemies of connection, I mean, what are the roadblocks or what are the obstacles that get in the way for you of genuine, authentic, getting to know your students and their unique stories? Think about that for just a moment. I mean, I can name some too that I've seen over the years in my involvement. Enemies of connection are that the parent doesn't want you to talk to the kid about anything, so you have to finesse that because they know the child will tell you things that they don't want you to know. Other things, maybe the child's behavior or the child's demeanor just doesn't allow that child to open up to you. But what are enemies of connection that you come across? As we ponder that, we want to go then to what works. What are the secret weapon connectors that you use to get to really know students? Maybe you have a trick up your sleeve, some ideas that work with kids, some strategies that work really well to get kids to talk. Maybe it's just a random question that you ask a kid on the yard or in your classroom that gets them to talk or to share. Maybe it's just asking, hey, how was your weekend? But what are those secret weapon connectors that really get a child to share with you and to feel that he or she belongs and that you care? One practice that I implemented in the last couple of years when a child became dysregulated in the classroom was to give the relationship back to the teacher. Now, if you're a teacher, probably you've done this. I've done this before as a teacher too. I've said, you need to go. Get out of my classroom, okay? Well, first of all, my tone and then my action are not very conducive to make that child feel wanted or feel like he or she belongs in that classroom. So one thing that I encouraged teachers to do in the last several years was to take back that relationship with the child. That means that the teacher wasn't calling me as the principal to come get the child out of class. The teacher was calling me so I could take the class and that she could go to the doorway or go to a quiet place in that classroom and have a connecting moment with the child outside of the classroom or apart from the other students, out of view of the other students. I told the teachers, don't let me steal your conflict. That conflict is a chance for you to connect with the child. In other words, relationship building, restoration, and resulting compliant behavior was more likely to occur if that child could meet with the teacher instead of being embarrassed by having to go to the principal or leave the room with the principal. Instead, that teacher has an authentic face-to-face opportunity with that child to really, really connect. And the truth of it is that most kids don't want to lose that relationship with their teacher. They value that and need that and crave that. So a challenge I have for you that kind of ties into that. Whether you're a teacher, whether you help on the yard, in the cafeteria, drive the bus, in the front office, whatever you do, make time to talk to students about anything except for school for 5 days. Now, doesn't mean your whole class period is just talking to the child. It means that you take a moment and you say, hey, how's your new puppy? Or where'd you go this weekend? I heard you were out of town. Was that a fun trip? And just connect with that child. Let that child bring the topic to you sometimes, because that is getting into their quality world. Sometimes you got to put a timer on it. You got to say, okay, time out. We're done talking about Minecraft. There's only so much Minecraft I can take. I know that. But talk to that child about something other than school. Doesn't matter how poorly or how well he or she is doing in school. Just take that moment. But then, if you're the principal, here's the double dog dare. If you're the principal, resist pulling a bad kid from class. Okay, and bad kid is in quotes because they're not bad kids. The kid might be dysregulated, the kid might be seeking attention, but resist going in and extricating that kid from the classroom. Give the teacher the gift of a moment to talk with the child while you take the rest of the class, okay? Now, I always enjoyed that unless it was 5th grade math, and I was like, oh no, please don't make me take the class. But if your principal, your administrator, or can go into your classroom and give you that 2 minutes for you to have time outside the classroom door to connect with that kid, you're going to see an amazing connection begin to happen, an amazing trust begin to happen with that child and you. We've heard this phrase. I looked at who this is attributed to. It's attributed to so many people, from Teddy Roosevelt to John Maxwell. So I don't know who really said it, but the concept is that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And they're not going to know how much you care unless they experience that firsthand. You are the carer. You need to provide that for the child. So just to go back to that case of me taking the child out of class, or taking the classroom so the teacher could take the child just outside the classroom door, to give you a feel for what that face-to-face might look like, it might just go something like this. Hey, Johnny, I'd like to hear from you for a moment. Mr. Loring's here so that you and I can talk just outside the door. When I'm teaching and you're talking over me, I feel disrespected. And I know that's not who you are, what you want to do. What can we do to help each other? And just having that moment for Johnny to have an opportunity to respond, to interact with you is huge. And it's not like you're presenting that he's in trouble. It's that you're presenting an opportunity for an authentic conversation with him so that you can talk to him and hear from him directly how things are going. So think about how you would like for your own children to be treated. Whether your kids are school age right now or whether they're in college, how did you want your own children to be treated? With high expectations, I hope, with love, and with forgiveness also. Are those traits that you can manifest in your classroom or in the yard or in your library, in your school office? Hopefully so. And then we need to celebrate victories. When you make such a connection with a kid, thank the child every time for the behavior that you and he talked about, for when he demonstrates that behavior in your classroom. Praise him, abundant praise for doing what is right. Sometimes we give points for that, but I'll tell you, words for me as a kid made a huge difference. Just encouraging and reassuring words from my teacher made a huge, huge difference. And you have to praise specific behaviors. And this is something I learned through what's called there's a bell again. Through the Virtues Project, I learned to state the child's name and to say, thank you for the virtue of responsibility. You picked up the papers under your desk before you left the class. Thank you for the virtue of kindness, for holding open the door for other students. Naming the child and then naming the virtue or the act that you're praising. That very specific praise is what reinforces the behaviors that we want and that really the child wants too. And sometimes we have to reteach behaviors, just like we would reteach a math concept. If a kid didn't get the math concept, you don't just keep moving ahead. You go back and say, wait a minute, do we need to role play this? Do we need to draw it out? Do you need more conversation about it? So praising specific virtues, maintaining connection, and reteaching behaviors as needed is a huge piece. I created also last year, or a couple of years ago, what I call a restoration. And y'all heard the buzz term, restorative practices, and there's PBIS, there's restorative practices, there's socio-emotional learning, SEL. That's kind of a blend of how we can intervene with children's behaviors. But on my restorative practices sheet, what I call it is a rethink restoration sheet. I asked a child to write down what happened. I asked him to write down, what were you thinking at the time? I asked him to write, what have you thought about since? I asked him to also write, who has been affected by what you've done? In what way? And then the final question, what do you think you need to do to make things right? And sometimes you might ask a question, depending on the age of the child, about the harm that was done. So what did your actions do? But having this conversation with the child, yes, sometimes you might need to send them out of class. Yes, sometimes the principal might need to facilitate this. But it's an easy way to have conversation starters, is having that sheet of just basic questions that bring the child to reflect on what he did and the impact on others, whether it's the classmates or whether it's the teacher. Here's another connection challenge. And I call it give them a sign. So you make a poster for your class that validates your students' worth and your privilege to be their teacher. It communicates that you long to be with them and that you validate each one of them. So just an example here in this slide, you might have this up on the board. Smart and wonderful students. Today, I have only 142 days left this year that I get to be your teacher. Even if in your head you're saying, oh gosh, I have 142 days left. This sign will create in them a sense of worth, a sense of value too, that you think they are important as a whole group. And then a larger school challenge could be something like with student council or the principal or a leadership team, make signs to put all over the school. Ideally at the beginning of the school year, but it could be anytime. It could be mid-year. Maybe you need it most right now. Make signs to put all over the school that validate all students. Little things that say, you're smart, you matter, you're amazing, what's your superpower? You have what it takes to succeed. All these positives, surround them with positives, okay? So I want to share some of the resources where some of these ideas have come from or where I've modified some of these ideas. And these are great little books to have in your classroom or in your school office or school library for staff to check out. I would even share some of them with parents from time to time. Dominic Smith, he's a man. He has written Better Than Carrots or Sticks. He really talks about restorative practices. So I kind of encapsulate it in a short little questionnaire that I have. It's much more than that. His book talks about restorative practices and how to build and repair relationships and how to teach students to do that. The second resource on here is the Diagnostic Center in Central California, the Fresno Diagnostic Center, also known as that, and their website. They were able to help. I know that they're continuing to help Hazel Fisher School too, even outside of the grant cycle. So maybe they would be available to your school. Again, they help with assessments, looking at improvement strategies, dyslexia training, all kinds of specialties. Mainly in the world of special education, but a lot of those strategies and a lot of the resources spill into general education as well. And then any of Dr. Ross Green's books, The Explosive Child or Lost at School, really help you to understand better children who are dysregulated or children who are just having a hard time adjusting to school. Super important information for parents as well as educators in those books. All right. And then I want to encourage you to stay connected, to keep helping. Oh no, who's that? Yeah. I didn't write that this year on that picture of myself. That was written in 8th grade. But stay connected. Keep helping students bringing out the best version of themselves. I was telling somebody this morning about a child that just gave me a hard time all last year. She was what I call a desk dumper. She would clear the room with anything that was on the desk and scatter it everywhere. Then the desk would go over. We'd have to evacuate the room, and then we would have to try to de-escalate, which was super hard to do. But once the room was cleared, and once there was one-on-one time with the child, and she came down from her dysregulation, she was able to reintegrate, to clean up, and to take care of business, in a sense, restore. And it gets messy sometimes. Restoring gets really messy. The gist of it, though, that I want you to know is that I went back to that school a couple of weeks ago, saw the same child in kindergarten. She was TK last year when she was a desk dumper. Saw her in kindergarten this year, and she said, "Mr. Laurie, I'm so sorry about last year." And I said, "What do you mean?" "I was mean to you." "Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for your apology. I appreciate that." And sometimes kids don't want to be what you end up seeing in your classroom or on the yard, but they are because of circumstances or because of ACEs or other challenges. That's where the connection helps. If you have any questions at all, I'm happy to talk to you via email or a phone call eventually. I just recently, as recent as this week, launched a website that's designed to help parents, especially in this interim time of doing hybrid school or no school or doing school at home, or trying to figure things out, how to be the teacher, but being the parent. It's www.successinschoolathome.com. It's kind of rudimentary right now, but it has the information in there is designed to help parents. It's designed to help educators that might just want some resources. I talk about socio-emotional learning support. I talk about parent self-care, subject area support. There's just a lot of areas in that website that I will be updating, and I'll be upgrading on that too. But that's a beginning website right now that just launched this weekend. So I want to point you to that as a resource as well. All right. And I know some of you may have questions at this time, so I want to be available to take questions. Karina, if you want to help facilitate that, or let me know how that works.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Brett. We do have a question from Susan Raisin, one of our behavioral health clinicians here at CCOE. She's wondering if you're available to teachers and administrators in other districts who might want to implement some of your connecting strategies.
Oh boy, I would love to be. I am full-time in Vallecito School District between my roles, which includes student support, teaching an elective Spanish class, and then doing student testing and writing district plans. But outside of that time, I would, if there's ever a time where maybe a school has a time when I'm not expected to be at work, I could do that. But I'm also happy to share my website, share this presentation, or to consult on the phone, just to talk on the phone about it.
Great, thanks, Brett.
Yeah, sure.
We did upload your presentation onto our Calvaris Trauma Consortium webpage, which can be found on the Calvaris County Office of Education website under Services and Calvaris Trauma Consortium.
Okay, great. One other thing I would just encourage everybody to do, as I attempted to look up my 8th grade teacher, if there's somebody in your past that really connected with you, that was a connector for you, or maybe for your own child in school, and they haven't heard a recent thank you, or maybe never heard a thank you, I bet that would mean so much. If you could write a note, look them up, send an email, just let them know that you appreciate the connection that they made, and then let them know the impact on your life and what you're doing now. I know that's meant a lot for me over the years as kids. Well, adults have done that.
Brett, you're getting kudos from some people in our session right now. And we also have another question from Mary Howell. She asked, can we make your website available to families who are distance learning with kids?
Absolutely. I would encourage that too. I will say there's nothing commercial on there. At one point, I will probably be adding some services like consultation services outside of my regular school hours. But that's not on there now. So it's not a sales pitch thing at all. It's information intended to help families. So absolutely, please do feel free to share that.
Great. Any other questions for Brett? Lots of colleagues saying you're doing a great job, Brett. Thank you for the
Oh.
information. Great ideas. We have a question from Cecine. She asks about clearing the classroom. She asks, isn't it disruptive to remove the whole classroom for a disruptive student rather than the student from the classroom?
Right, and I've heard different takes on this. The way I was trained was to have the classroom, the rest of the students removed at a point where you determine there's potential danger to that child who is experiencing some dysregulation or danger to the teacher or the other students. At that point, it is recommended to remove the whole class, and then two professionals, somebody that helps a tag team stays with the child in the classroom. Super disruptive, I agree, but oftentimes in the best interest of the rest of the class and the child. Sometimes in attempting to remove a child too, they're so dysregulated that they might cause more injury to themselves, or you may end up causing injury if you attempt to move that child. So I've ended up moving desks so that child doesn't bang her head on the desk, or he doesn't end up, grabbing the computer and pulling it off the desk onto the floor. There's special training for that, and CPI training. There's well, Karina, the other trainings.
Yeah, PROACT.
PROACT, yeah, lots of different trainings that will probably teach that same premise of evacuating the rest of the class and then having two people at least work with that child to help him or her self-regulate.
I would just add that our goal with the RISE program was always to help children maintain regulation so that they wouldn't escalate to that level. Yeah. So when you're giving a child interventions where they're going to a room and participating in regulating strategies, those more explosive behaviors are going to be few and far between.
Absolutely. We saw that in person. Karina and I did constantly. Yeah. It was a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for Brett? Cecine says, thank you, Brett.
Sure thing.
I think at this point, Brett, we'll go ahead and wrap up your session unless there's anything else you want to leave us with.
Just encouragement to keep connecting, because it's going to make a difference, and you may not see it, but it will come back and you will be reminded of the difference you made in at least one child's life, probably more. So I'm just encouraging everybody, especially in these crazy times, hang in there, be strong, and let your best version of yourself come out with the children.
Thank you, Brett.
Thanks, everybody.